3, 2, 1. Hi, my name is Lyric, and today we are continuing the series of The Conspiracy Theory Iceberg by Wendigoon. It is part 2. This episode is 36 minutes long. I'm going to be talking throughout it because that's what I do. So, grab your popcorn and stuff. We're going to be in for a long ride. I'm going to see if I believe it, see why I don't believe it, why I do believe it, and see if it's plausible, why people would believe it, and talking about Wendigoon. And we're going to keep reacting more to these videos. If you have any more Wendigoon videos or any more videos just at all you want me to react to, put in the comments. I put them in a list to see if I want to react to them or not. And if I do, I do. So, yeah, let's begin. If you like the video, make sure to like the video if you believe the theory that Wendigoon himself is actually a giant. Now let's begin.
What is up, boys? We are now
What is up, boys?
Tier 2. There's a few things I need to go ahead and...
This is the era of Wendigoon when I have a better mic than him. It's a rare era, considering he has 1.8 million, and I'm currently chilling on a cool 580. Shout out to you, 580, though. Ultimate OGs.
That makes sense, and some disclaimers I need to get out of the way now. After doing research into this tier, some topics, especially ones I'll cover near the end of this tier, I get why people are being banned from YouTube for talking about
That's a good start. That's a good start.
Things that are very controversial.
When you're doing a conspiracy theory iceberg, those are the things you want to hear.
That I will have to kind of speak in code a little bit, but all of the
We get you, man. We get you. I'm turning you up a little bit.
Just know I've got to be careful with some of it because it will get you instant zapped. Also,
I see.
I figured out while researching this. Several of these conspiracy theories work in tiers off of each other in themselves.
Makes sense.
Like what I mean in tier 1, I mentioned giants. Well, there's one in this tier that is a more specific description of giants.
Okay, more in depth.
There are
so it's kind of like an iceberg within an iceberg, because it's like a giant's iceberg. So starting off with the thing most talking about giants, and then going down and getting more and more in detail about the giants as it goes down. So it's kind of like icebergs within iceberg. That's kind of interesting.
Accounts of history that can be explained with giants. So they sort of work.
I love iceberg videos, by the way. So if you want me to react to any more, put that in the comment section below. Not just by Wendigoon, just by anyone.
In stairs of each other.
I know Wendigoon doesn't really do them anymore. His videos are still great, though.
Some of these theories are specifically set up theories. What I mean by that is that it'll be a concept or belief that will be.
By the way, if you don't know, if you haven't seen me react to part 1, I've seen this before. I've seen the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg before. I watched it as they came out, but I haven't, because I watched them as they came out, I haven't seen them in a while, and I want to provide my input on them, so that's why I'm reacting to this. So this is not a first-time reaction, so don't get fooled.
Mentioned that may not make sense on its own, but it will apply later, or at least it's something to keep in mind for later. Like, for example, a lot of the ones dealt with in this tier have to do with auras and spiritualism. The reason being, a lot of the other theories don't make sense across the whole iceberg unless you're familiar with those concepts. And last thing, a few of these I'm going to introduce my own theories into. What I mean by that is, while researching, I've seen parallels or connections drawn between two separate things. So I will kind of skip around within a tier, like I'll do in this video, to connect one topic to another directly. And that is entirely my own guess on it, essentially. Without further ado, there are a lot of these, so let's get started. But
let's go.
Thank you for watching. Tier 2's title
You're welcome,
is
man. You're welcome.
Research,
Thank you for watching.
Described as theories and Twilight Zone level stuff. Most of these entries can easily be studied through the use of mainstream medias, but they require a good grasp of how the world works to be fully understood. Common people rarely go this deep. First up, we have lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming is a well-known concept that during sleep, some people can control their dreams and what happens in them. I, for one, am one of these people. However, the theory comes in.
I am not one of these people. I've tried it. I can't do it.
Can either affect things that happen
you just try harder,
or affect their thought process by manipulating things in the dreamscape. Next up.
So the thing about lucid dreaming, it's a really interesting thing to do. I've never been able to do it. I think I've maybe did it. I think I remember actually I did do it once. I realized it was in the dream, but I couldn't control anything in it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just bad at lucid dreaming. I couldn't figure out how to do it. I need to try it again. But yeah, but it's a really interesting concept. Just living in a world you can control everything, just interacting with your dreams. The thing about doing things in the real world, don't really believe that, but interacting your thought process is definitely a thing you can do with lucid dreaming. I think it can be a very good, cool experience.
Up is MK Ultra.
MK
Ultra
here we
is
go.
a rather well-known experiment that happened with the CIA in the 1970s, late 60s, in which people were brought in and influenced with psychotropics and other mind-altering drugs for the
Right.
CIA to view the effects of and potentially use in PSYOPs, which again was something mentioned in Tier 1. This is a rather well-known event. Most of the theories stem from
Yep.
the idea that either it's still going on or it was done at a great larger scale than the populace is aware of. Next up we have
MK Ultra is one of those things. It's probably one of those things that's like the most thing. What am I trying to say? It's the thing that's the most insane things that is like sounds like it would be a crazy conspiracy, but it's like 100% confirmed. Like MK Ultra did happen. Like it's just a thing that the government made a test to brainwash people by giving them different types of drugs and doing all this shit. They try to learn how to brainwash people, and tried to cover it up. That was just the thing. It's 100% confirmed. So it's not even a theory, really. It's just insane that something like that actually happened, and it leaves you to know what things have happened like that are not confirmed, and things such as and it really lends credence to other conspiracies of the government doing crazy shit.
We have hypnosis. Again, this is one of those
Kinda related.
establishing theories.
Okay, sure.
As we all know, hypnosis is influencing the watcher to either recall things from the past or implant memories and yada yada things such as. Next up we have fluoride.
Right.
Fluoride has to do with the fact that in the U.S.
I don't know what to
fluoride
comment
is
on that.
inserted
Fluoride.
into tap water in order to help with tooth enamel and digestion and yada yada things such as.
Right.
The conspiracy comes
And things
from the
such
fact
as.
that fluoride is a chemical and can therefore chemically castrate or influence other biomechanical things in the body. So this will be more tied in later, but such as pineal gland calcification is believed to be a side effect of fluoride poisoning or fluoride control, as people believe. Speaking of pineal gland calcification,
Fluoride. I don't know. I need to look into that. There's more evidence to support why fluoride would be bad.
is the idea that the pineal gland in the body
It is kind of suspicious, though. Just like, oh, we put something in your water to help your tooth enamel. Why would the hell does the government care about my tooth enamel, bruh?
calcifies
Like, that doesn't seem like something they do. Like, it seems suspicious. I just need more evidence for that. Pineal gland calcification.
after a certain point. This is actually true, however, the side effects of the theory are not. The way the pineal gland works is it has to do with growth and hormone supplements in the body, but after someone passes puberty, it's not really needed anymore, and the gland simply calcifies and dies out.
Right.
The theory comes from the idea that things such as fluoride and other things taken in the body causes the gland to calcify and keeps us from reaching either our full brain or physical potential. This goes into weird theories about how to uncalcify and things such as, but it is true that as you get older, you don't need the pineal gland anymore, so it kind of just withers away. Next,
Is there countries that don't? I'm sure there has to be countries that don't put fluoride in their water. Do they? I feel like that theory can be pretty easily disproved if there's a country that doesn't put fluoride in their water, and their pineal glands still calcify.
next up we have
Cicada 3301, great video by Lemino about this.
cicada. This is in reference to Cicada 3301, which was a large-scale codebreaker event that happened in...
I think events like these are so cool, like
A
codebreaker
random
things.
account appeared with the name
The
Cicada
gigantic
3301
rabbit holes.
and had these large puzzles for people to solve. There have been a total of 3, with a new one being added every time the last one gets figured out. However, the third one, to this day, despite being posted in 2016, has still not been found out. The site says the reason for this is that they are recruiting code breakers from some kind of secret project that no one's aware of. It's a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. I may make a video on it someday. There's several videos out there, and give the third puzzle a look. You may be the code breaker that's wanted for whatever super sleep
Hasn't
activity
been
they
solved
can
in
plan.
like
The McFly code
when
is
they come
our
out,
first look at one
2016?
of the more kooky ones.
2014?
It is a belief that the Back to the Future movie predicted 9/11.
The YouTube video about this is so good, guys. It sounds so stupid. It sounds so stupid that freaking Back to the Future predicts 9/11, but the YouTube video, it's a really good YouTube video. It has like 10 million views. But yet when you search Back to the Future predicted 9/11, it's like the 20th video to come up. That's kind of suspicious, by the way. Yeah, it's a great video. It's super creepy. And especially because the guy who uploaded it hasn't uploaded in like 5 years, it seemed. But yeah, he's still replying to comments. It's super weird. Because I looked in the comments of that video. Please watch that video. Back to the Future predicts 9/11. It sounds so stupid, but it really makes no sense why it would predict 9/11. But um, it's just really interesting. And I was looking at the newest comments because I hadn't uploaded in 5 years, and he said someone said, "Where have you been?" He said, "I got lobotomized." That's creepy. I don't know. Yeah, it's just weird, bro. It's just weird. I don't know.
The evidence of this is saying such as the shopping mall that
Twin Pine to Lone Pine
is Twin Pines Shopping Mall, or the fact that the first clock of the movie shows 9:55, which on a hand dial would be 9:11, and things such as, and this all connects to the idea that
things such as
the people who did 9/11 make movies and blah blah blah. You get it. Dowsing or
dowsing
is an idea that using a fork of metal, people can pick up on sonic vibrations from the earth in order to find underground supplies of water, oil, etc. It's more of a wives' tale than anything now, but there is some truth to it when it comes to how people used to found oil refineries. However, the way this leads back into a theory is it's one of those establishing, once again, that there are sonic vibrations within the earth. Next up, we have Admiral Byrd.
Right.
This is one of the first.
This is a really interesting one.
Ones, in my opinion. Admiral Byrd
I know about
was
this
in
one.
Antarctica shortly after World War II in something called Operation High Jump, which was essentially an idea to figure out whatever the Nazis were looking for in Antarctica during World War II, which relates to this place called Base 221, which was supposedly a Nazi outpost in Antarctica. When he returned back, he was put into isolation for 36 hours and was told not to speak of what he found to anyone under any circumstances, to which he was then given the Medal of Honor and told to leave. While this is odd, many connect it to the idea of what the Nazis were looking for in the first place, which is something known as Agartha. Which brings us in.
So, okay, we're gonna get into Agartha here, but, Admiral Byrd, yeah, that's not suspicious at all. Just goes to Antarctica, comes back, is given the Medal of Honor, told to shut up, and then just leaves. Yeah, that's not suspicious at all. Agartha next, here we go.
Topic, Agartha. In theory, Agartha is a civilization located beneath the Earth. This gets into a larger idea called Hollow Earth theory, that inside of the Earth, it is essentially a flipped gravitational pull, and there's an entire world operating beneath us. What's interesting throughout history is how different civilizations and leaders have been dedicated to finding this quote-unquote Agartha, such as Hitler during World War II,
Right.
and other ancient tribes have tales of people that live beneath. How that's connected is since Agartha is what Germany was looking for in World War II, and since that's where Admiral Byrd went to go look and then was told to shut up and never talk about it, many believe Admiral Byrd found Agartha and then was told to simply never talk about it. Next,
The thing about Agartha is it has a weird amount of evidence to it in this iceberg. He gets mentioned a lot in the iceberg, and it has a weirdly good amount of evidence to it for something that makes no sense. On its surface, it makes no sense. Scientifically, Hollow Earth doesn't make any sense. But it had a weird amount of evidence to it, so I don't think I believe Agartha because it makes no sense. But it's weird how much evidence there is to it. I don't know. I have no explanation to tell you because it makes no sense, but it also makes sense with the evidence. I don't know. They're on to weather control. HARP.
next up we have Weather Control, or HARP. HARP stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, which is an actual military base located in Alaska. The purpose of this base is to monitor weather activity, although many have accused it as being a weather control base, such as Hugo Chavez saying that the earthquakes that occurred in South America were due to meddling at the HARP location in Alaska. This goes deeper. There's a lot of people who trace the weather around the area to look for signs on it, so you can check it out yourself. But basically, the idea in Alaska that the government has a weather control base.
I wouldn't be surprised if they can control the weather with the technology. Wouldn't be that
Masons
surprised.
is another one of those establishing ideas. It essentially goes off of the well-known idea that the Masons are shady and they influence several politics and events that happen around the world. So
Hand
this
in
is
pocket.
another one of those asterisk ones. Keep the Masons in mind for things that come later.
What was I gonna say? I was just thinking about that SpongeBob episode where they were wearing the eye on the hat. Looks kind of creepy, like Illuminati / Freemasons.
23 Enigma is simply
23 Enigma, shout out Jordan.
an idea that the number 23
And LeBron, I
is
guess.
suspicious throughout
Draymond
history,
Green, Mitchell
and
Robinson.
things such as dates and events, a number of casualties, and things such as. You can look in this one yourself.
Julius Caesar stabbed 23 times, I think.
About it, starring Jim Carrey. But
Right.
essentially, the idea that the number 23 is to be avoided. Next up, we have astral projection. Astral projection relates a lot to lucid dreaming, although it's a little bit different. The idea of astral projection is that while sleeping or in a trance-like state, someone can remove their soul or their consciousness from their body and walk around and influence things. Experiments with this include hospitals who have put messages on the roof, and people who claim to astrally project have projected above the hospital, so to speak, been able to read what was on the roof, come back down, and tell the doctors what they saw. Next up, we have...
I don't know if I believe it per se, but I think it would be like... I wouldn't be surprised if there's a way to remove the consciousness from the body, because we still don't know what consciousness is. We still don't really know what it is. Like, you could die. For what we know, we don't know what consciousness is. You could die and your consciousness still be alive, but just have no way to work because you don't have a brain. So you're just sitting there, without thought. You're just a consciousness, which is a really terrifying idea. But yeah, so because we don't know what consciousness is, it is a possibility that you could, maybe it's in some way you can remove it from the body, like really complicated science. But we're far, far away from that. If it is possible, because we still don't even know what consciousness is. If we don't know what it is, we can't make any assumptions about it. So I would not rule that completely out of the picture.
Succubi. This will relate more in theories on, such as giants, but essentially the idea is that there are these supernatural entities disguised as women that feed off of men's energy by appearing as a sexual being or feeding off of their life force or things such as.
Brittany Reiner?
Eastern philosophy is incredibly vague. I can only imagine this is also a setup as it applies to Hinduism and Taoism,
very vague.
Just general ideas of spirituality, yin and yang, so on and so forth. Nephilim is what I was referring to earlier
Giants.
when speaking of giants. Nephilim is a more specific concept. Specifically in the Old Testament, it says that some of the angels that fell to earth whenever Satan was cast out had children with humans on earth, and that created creatures known as Nephilim, or giants. In the Old Testament, several of the tribes that were wiped out or ordered to be wiped out by God were these Nephilim creatures. Famous characters such as Goliath from the Bible are specific instances of it. Where this goes further is the idea that they still exist in modern day, or small tribes and civilizations are made up of them. The missing cosmonauts relates to the Cold War space race.
Yeah, in the Bible, they just kind of casually mention giants. Like, it's normal. Yeah, we got the humans, we got the giants, just casually.
Before Yuri Gagarin was successfully shot into space, that Russia shot up several other people, but since they all died or never made it back to Earth, they simply kept it quiet as a way to not cause bad publicity during the Cold War. This one is definitely more feasible than others on the list.
Right.
The idea that the Russian government would cover up failures in its space program, but it does make it horrifying to think about how many people could have died in the search for the man in space.
The thing about that, yeah, that's definitely one of the most plausible ones, because, the government killing people and hiding it is not an uncommon thing at all. It's not uncommon at all. Like, it's pretty common. As fucked up as it is, it's pretty common. I didn't know, especially like the Soviet Union and stuff. Don't doubt this one whatsoever. I would not be the slightest bit surprised if this was confirmed. We do got an ad though, so we do have to skip it. Okay, we couldn't skip it. That's okay. Oh, the Ultimate Pass. This is another Lemino video.
Interesting one.
And reacts to
I'll
Lemino.
absolutely make a video on someday. But the short version is 9 researchers went missing in Russia in the Siberian area, and when they went to be found, they were all dead, either from having all of their bones shattered, their jaws ripped off, other
tongues removed,
that in no way seemed natural to the
Right.
point that the coroner's report on it says they were killed by a quote,
Overwhelming force.
overwhelming, compelling force,
Right.
which
So vague.
could be literally anything.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a very interesting story.
Wasn't there an
Very
update on
creepy.
this? I swear I saw something there was an update on
Declassified
this.
documents is also super
I
vague.
don't know.
This is probably just referring to the JFK files and other government documents that have been released in recent years, and the fact that they proved and disproved several conspiracy theories. So, yeah, go figure. Summoning is also a setup concept. Basically, just the idea that
Slash
people can
summon.
bring in
Shout out
evil
Minecraft.
or good entities, either through actions or rituals. So specific supernatural beings can be conjured up by an individual. One of which is another concept on the iceberg: tulpas. Tulpas are what we would traditionally figure as an imaginary friend. Essentially, the idea that someone can think an entity up so much and imagine them to the point that a spirit inhabits that being. So the idea that imaginary friends kids have, or ideas that always set in your mind, are not merely ideas but are now possessed by a specific entity. So don't worry about that monster under the bed too much.
Let me give you something about this. So we don't know what consciousness is. So what if consciousness I sound like I'm high as hell, but what if consciousness, if you think of another consciousness with your consciousness so much, it makes another consciousness, but not in a physical being, so you can't interact with it, but it has a physical capability in your mind, right? So it becomes a real thing because you thought of it in your consciousness, so it becomes its consciousness. Now think about this. Religion. Even if, let's say the religion, even if it wasn't true, billions of people thinking constantly about about something. If in the Tulpas theory, would that make religious figures like actual real gods that exist because of the consciousness of people coming all together in their consciousness to create the consciousness of a god? Think about that.
Operation Bluebeam was an idea put forward by Sergey, whatever, Manas, which said that NASA was working with the UN and world governments to pose a new religion in which NASA would fake the second coming of Christ in order to set up the Antichrist as the Godhead. And it essentially relates to the end of times, the idea that all world governments are working together to destroy the population, and he called this entire thing Operation Bluebeam. So yeah, cult knowledge.
This is kind of unrelated, but is there a show about like trying to make a realistic show about what would happen if like Jesus actually returned? Can you imagine if one day Jesus Christ comes back to the earth? Like, what would actually happen? All hell would break loose in the world. The any religion getting proved to be true would break would break everything in the world, bro. People would be rethinking their entire lives. Like that needs to be made into a show.
Knowledge is also a super vague one. Basically, the just knowledge of the occult itself. So, occult's defined as anything that is supernatural but not strictly spiritual. So, werewolves, monsters, creatures of the night, etc., etc. Again, this is another setup. It just occurred to me that we are not even halfway done. Magica was weird to find anything for, mostly because I think there is a card game of the same name. But from the best I can figure, Magica is essentially the idea that magic is divided into 5 categories. That are the arcane, the illusionary, the aura, manipulation, and elemental. So I could be completely off, but that's all I could find.
Nice.
Next we have the shelled or firmament earth. This comes from the idea posed in Genesis in the Bible that before the flood, the earth was covered with a firmament, or essentially a wrapping of water that allowed oxygen to flourish and things such as. Now it's mentioned in the flood that that firmament was destroyed. However, theorists believe that there's still a firmament of some kind and that the earth sort of exists within a shell. And most of what I found with this related back to hollow earth theory. So I think they're kind of tied, if not directly. Men in Black is a concept that is
I don't know how to
readily
feel
known
about that one. I don't
that
know. I don't think
government
I have anything
agents
to
who
say.
simply wear a suit and use fake names appear to cover up evidence often. This relates to theories such as Polybius, which we'll get into later,
Oblivious.
or people going missing.
Hello, angry video game
And
nerd.
it's essentially the deepest level of government cover-up you can go, that completely nameless and identificationless people will show up in black suits and change things however the government wants them.
I don't deny that whatsoever. I don't think it's like I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised if it got confronted that nameless government people go up to you and tell you not to do things and kill you if you disobey that. I mean, that's just something governments do. I don't think I wouldn't deny that one bit.
Boy in the Box is a real-world case that happened in
Know about this
1957
one?
in Philadelphia, in which a boy's body was found in a box on the side of the river, and he was never identified. This was weird because no one nearby reported a missing child, no orphanages reporting missing children, nothing. It was just a body found in a box for some reason, which implies murder or foul play, but no one ever knows who did it, and there's never been any connection made. Most theories relate to the idea that it was a cover-up by an orphanage or things such as, but it doesn't change the fact that it's odd that a child could just disappear and no one would notice. Reality simulations is another setup.
Maybe the parents, because no one presumes missing child if you killed your kid. But wouldn't people realize, because you'd have a birth certificate, people would realize that there's just some guy that isn't, that he got born and then isn't here anymore. I don't know.
Basically, the whole Matrix idea that reality itself is either one giant simulation for everyone or certain individuals. Clown sightings are in reference to in 2016, whenever various people showed up in clown costumes with knives and weapons and began threatening people in public. What's interesting about this is ask yourself, do you know of anyone that dressed up as a clown?
I remember this.
Or have you heard of anyone dressing up as a clown? And why did it happen in thousands all across the US at once? No one's ever came forward, there were never any public plans made, but yet, all at once, they just showed up and then went away. Weird.
My theory for that is that it was marketing. It was low-key marketing for the movie It, because I'm pretty sure the movie It released like a year after that, and like the trailer's being released at, like after shortly after that. So my theory is that there was secret marketing done for the movie It.
Is the
It works too, probably. It probably made people more scared of clowns at the time.
idea that one can see the future or have premonitions of the future through supernatural means. So essentially through meditation or summoning, someone can figure out what will happen in the future. Space is fake is exactly what it says.
Great
Space
theory.
is fake.
Space fake.
Either the night sky is a simulation
I believe it.
or it is a sort of curtain that's been put up by extraterrestrials in order to give the illusion of space, even though it's not real. Pantheism is a more traditional idea that there is not necessarily a God, but more so that God is a being completely outside the understanding of people, and instead exists all around us everywhere at once, or we are essentially a part of God. It is a very spiritualist idea of the universe. Intelligent design is exactly what it says, that people were made intelligently and with purpose as opposed to a random set of accidents or coincidences, and this is pretty much the basis of every religion, that people were created rather than accidentally.
That's probably the best argument for religion. I feel that like there has to be some explanation for all of this. I think that's the best argument for religion.
The oil rigs was interesting, and I had no idea about it until reading this. Apparently in LA, regular oil rigs are not up to code or sightly for the city, so they're hidden in completely normal buildings like this. Every floor you see is fake. All of it is just an exterior covering, and inside is just a working oil rig, and these exist all down the street in LA. Also, this isn't really a theory, it's literally what it is. There are oil rigs working inside
That's just weird.
buildings in LA.
Just
Ghost Girl
driving in LA, knowing there's just buildings that are just nothing in them but an oil rig that's just not up to standard.
was also very fake.
How do they get away with that? If people know about it, how are they still getting away with that?
It's just simply referring to the idea of a ghostly girl watching over people when they sleep, or in the corners when they are awake, which I think is something a lot of people can relate to, I hope. Operation Fishbowl was real-world events that happened in 1962, in which the government started launching nukes into the atmosphere and detonating them, essentially to see what happened. It was called Operation Fishbowl because of the shape that the nuclear cloud would take when that high in the atmosphere. Not only did this probably have disastrous consequences on the weather and environment, but the whole thing Oppenheimer was afraid of,
I was about to say that.
the nuke could light the atmosphere on fire and kill us all, not 20 years later, they were directly firing them at the atmosphere to see what would happen. So, good job, team. Archdemons and Archangels is another idea that comes from Christianity.
Crafts accuses the government. What do we do? Let's just fire, instead of doing some science to like maybe hypothesize what will happen. Nah, let's just fire some nukes in the atmosphere. You know what bad could happen with that? Imagine if it actually caught the atmosphere on fire. Imagine if that was how the world ended, because just some guys said, "Hey, let's just launch some nukes into the atmosphere," you know?
Christianity.
And people wonder why aliens don't visit us.
Originally, Archangels were the lead warriors or chieftains of the angels, so as they were cast out of heaven, they would become archdemons. So this is just the idea of these very powerful demons and angels existing. The Philosopher's Stone is an idea that was originally put forward by Charlemagne the Great of what is now Holy Roman Empire. That's it. The Philosopher's Stone was the basis.
Charlemagne is the direct descendant of I'm pretty sure of every monarch in Europe. Pretty sure. And saying that one day, recording this one day after the Queen died, so great.
What is known as alchemy, which is essentially converting one element into a different kind of element. This stone was something he wrote about several times in his findings, that when approaching another element could simply turn it into something else. So what ancient societies would know as magic, we would know as extreme radioactive properties, or whatever have you with what theory you're following. What's interesting is the Philosopher's Stone, as it's mentioned, has never been found, although there are things similar. So it is, like I said, essentially the bedrock of what is now alchemy. My red is not your red.
I like this theory.
It's kind of novel, but now overknown concept that just because I see a color one way does not mean you see a color one way.
Vsauce introduced me to this one.
Completely different colors, but because we've both spent our entire life thinking that something is blue, we both call it blue without knowing. We each see different kinds of blues. It's just that concept.
So yeah, because like colorblind people, they're gonna see colors differently because they're gonna see two colors as the same, or yeah, they're gonna see like two colors as the same, and it's not gonna be the same for everyone else. But I could see a different. So I could be looking at the color red and see a completely different color to what you're seeing when you look at the color red. And but because I've been calling that color red my entire life, and you've been calling the color red that entire life, and the things I've been associating the same things with red as you have. We just believe that they're both the same thing, but it could be completely different.
Vampires, while at first may be seem odd, it does make sense in the grander scheme of things that it's on this list. For example, take old world ideologies and think about why they believed in vampires the way they did. Things such as certain people need to be staked through the heart, or tied up, or in some cases flipped upside down in a coffin. What would the reason for that be unless they had seen something that made them think that was necessary? And it leads into this whole idea of maybe our understanding of humans in history isn't what we think it is.
I think a lot of things like that, but things that people think are fictional, could have a possibility of being real, because like why would people believe it at the time, and why do so many cultures make up think of that? And the thing about vampires, they're like so strangely specific. They're such a weird, for how popular they are, they're so strangely specific. Like, oh, I'm gonna kill it with garlic, or stabbing it through a heart with a wood stake. Like, that's so specific, bro. Like, what? Or I'll put it in the sun and it'll burn. Like, why is that so specific, bro? It's almost like it was based off something real.
Aura is another setup one. It's essentially the idea that humans exude this spiritual energy around them that changes with their mood and things such as. And this goes into gravitational pulls and sonic vibrations of the earth and things such as. Francis Levy's handprint is interesting. I didn't know anything about this until doing the research for this video. In 1924, a man named Francis Levy was a firehouse worker who, while cleaning a window, got ordered to go away on a call. On that call, him along and 7 other crewmen died in a fire. After this whole event was over, someone tried to spray the window of the firehouse, and his handprint would not come off. This got to the point that they used bleach, acid, pressure washers, all of it. And it became a novelty around the town. People would come to see it. The glass company came to try to see if they could figure it out. but for whatever reason, this handprint was perfectly formed onto this window. The ending is kind of ridiculous, though. In 1944, a boy who was throwing newspapers through one and broke the window, ending the legacy. But it is odd that this handprint stayed completely unfazed by all of the removal process for 20 years.
That's a really cool story, but what I'm more concerned about is how do you throw a newspaper so hard it breaks a window? Do you know how light a newspaper is, bro? Dude, so I'm in school, right? I literally weighed a paper. It's not as big as a newspaper, but like one piece of paper. No, it was like 3 pieces of paper because they were stapled together. It weighed less than a grape. We had a scale and we were weighing stuff. My paper weighed less than 1 grape. It was 3 pieces of paper. Do you know how light? So that's how light. So add a few more to that, and that's a newspaper. How do you throw that so hard it breaks a window? I'm way more concerned about that.
Bohemian Grove is a 2,700
Here we go.
acre campsite in the western United States, which has been home to several presidents such as Reagan, Nixon, etc.
That's
what's weird.
Anything that has been home to multiple presidents that we don't know exactly what it is so suspicious.
About Bohemian Grove,
regardless of what it is.
Theories that go around it. For example, there are no pictures taken during certain commencement ceremonies, and people who have claimed to sneak in and take pictures have gotten some weird stuff from it. This all goes back to the idea of secret societies and things that happen, but essentially Bohemian Grove is a gathering place for world elites to do who knows what. Lost civilization.
If that is not the most suspicious thing you have ever heard in your life, like, I can't even add anything to that. That's just the most suspicious thing I've ever heard.
Is simply in reference to the fact there are entire societies that are known about in ancient texts, but that we just can't find. The Mayans, for example, was supposed to have 3 giant cities, and only 2 have been discovered. With our understanding and GPS satellites, it's really weird that these entire civilizations just simply can't be found. The Vikings are another one. Several of the sites that they talk about being set up at or where they lived have just never been discovered. This goes into conspiracies of cover-ups or of information being hidden and things such as, but it's an interesting concept that these entire worlds can just disappear.
That's true. That is really weird, to be fair.
Super vague, just supernatural entities that
very vague.
The normal realm of logic.
We got an ad. That boy was excited. No, freak you, Burger King. Who is keeping Burger King in business?
Professional sports scripted is exactly what it says. The idea
There's a
that
list on my channel.
and elites make up what happens in the games, even if the players aren't necessarily aware of it, in order to drive revenue in the right direction, or ticket sales, or blah blah blah, money, money, money.
I think it's partially true. They're not completely scripted. But I think it is partially true that they try to rig stuff. Cough, cough. 2002 Western Conference Finals, Lakers vs. Kings, Game 6. You know? Cough, cough. Literally every draft lottery ever. I wouldn't be surprised if literally every single draft lottery is rigged. Yeah, basically.
Snuff cinema in itself is not a theory, it's a real thing. It's simply the
If you guys want me to react to the disturbing movie Iceberg, tell me.
idea that people will actually take videos of people being murdered or raped or things such as and sell them on the dark web or in shady circles. Where most of the theory comes in is who makes these may be higher up elitists, or at least the buyers might be. So while this is a real world thing, it gets a lot more creepy when you think about who may be consuming it.
This is kind of related. Think about this, right? There have been so many high up elite people with a lot of money that have been caught for horrible crimes, mainly like sexual crimes and stuff, right? Like pedophilia and stuff. Cough, cough, Jeffrey Epstein, right? But there has never been a really like rich, powerful person, celebrity or whatever, that has ever been caught for like being a serial killer. There has to be at least one rich person that's been a serial killer. With the amount of rich people that have done other horrible things, some rich person had to have been a serial killer at some point that we just don't know because it's been covered up, or they were just a really good serial killer at you know, not getting caught. There has to have been one celebrity serial killer. Comment down below who you think is the most likely celebrity to be a serial killer.
Stalking is a phenomenon that is mostly observed in schizophrenics, but it is the idea that several mundane people are following you at any given time. So what that may mean practically is whenever you walk up to the mailbox, your neighbor looks at you. Whenever you drive to work, a car pulls up beside you and it's kind of going the same speed. And when you get to work,
This is Chris Chan's life.
someone keeps glancing at you. The idea of gangstalking
Kinda
is that all
sad.
these people are
Really
in
sad,
on it
actually.
and are conspiring against you for some reason. This is also seen a lot in conspiracy theorist circles, with ideas that people who know too much are being followed by essentially men in black in disguise.
Right.
Experiments on humans, also super vague, but as mentioned before with things such as MK Ultra and experiments that we know happened in World War II,
Right.
it's kind of a real thing. I guess the theory would be the
basically a real
extent of it
thing,
or
yeah.
the modern application of it.
Yeah.
Sixth extinction is the idea that there have been 5 primary extinctions in history, such as the meteor and the ice age and things like that. And
Right.
we are currently on the 6th extinction, which would be man and would be a man-made issue that we created ourselves. Pseudoscience
That's kind of true, because more species are going extinct now than ever because of human intervention. So that's kind of true.
relates to old world theories,
Not than ever, like at one time, but like a lot of species are going extinct now compared to normal because of human intervention.
or mostly old world theories of things such as the 4 constants in the body being science or spiritualism, things such as, and essentially
And things
where
such
it comes
as?
to conspiracy theories is saying that there's more credit to it than has been disproved by science, and the discredit of it is simply repression. The Saturn rings theory comes from the idea that the rings of Saturn were created when an asteroid collided into it some time ago, and the particles of that asteroid were simply caught in its gravitational pull and formed Saturn's rings.
Right.
Where this gets creepy is thinking that Saturn, speaking in space, is not that far from us. So if something could hit it, something could hit us. Polar shift
Bad
is
theory.
essentially the idea that over time the Earth's magnetic poles have shifted, and this will inevitably lead to a cataclysmic event of tectonic plates smashing together and earthquakes and storms and what have you. It's essentially an end of the world idea. The Large
Right.
Hadron Collider is a real thing that exists in, I believe, Germany. But the entire
Right.
point of it is it works as essentially a giant gun to shoot particles at each other at speeds of
Make
light.
black holes
What's
for
interesting is the
microseconds.
last time this was done, it created a new particle called the Higgs boson. What it essentially did was prevent the machine from being used further. And I should also mention, before this firing happened, there was a shock wave that ripped through the machine, damaging it and making them take more time to repair it. A physicist theorized that since time works as a 4th dimension, that shooting 2 particles together at such speeds would theoretically create a black hole. But since the way time and waves work, and there's people who can explain this much better than I can, shock waves ripple backwards through time in order to
That's really cool to
prevent
think about.
us from causing an event that would theoretically destroy the future version. This all has to do with the idea of time as a 4th dimension, and we just move through it linearly, although it can be manipulated, and yada yada yada. It's really cool stuff. Look into it yourself if you like, but that's the idea.
Hadron Collider scares me so much. It just takes one mess up. You've seen Chernobyl. It just takes one mess up, bro, and you got a black hole. Instead of Chernobyl destroying everything and anywhere in its distance, it just destroys the entire Earth if you mess up, because it makes black holes for microseconds. What if it makes it for like 1 full second, bro? Just 1 full second and the Earth's destroyed, bro. Like I don't trust that. I don't trust it.
Umlaut is a body of space debris that passed near our sun some years ago and was viewed from the research station of the same name in Hawaii. What was interesting is that analyzing the particles of this, it seemed to be rather homey to us. It contained carbon and things that looked like Earth and stuff such as, and was
Stuff such as that
probably
time.
launched after a star exploded some however many galaxies away. What's interesting is the idea that if that Earth was destroyed, and also keep in mind, this thing would have been a whole lot bigger than our Earth. If that super Earth was destroyed by its sun exploding, what means the same couldn't happen to us? The World War II Black Book was a book that was found in Berlin in 1945 that had the name of several British citizens, in fact thousands of them, with their names, addresses, and places of work that were essentially on a hit list, so to speak, if Germany was to win the war. What's weird about this is why the Black Book would still exist at such a point as 1945 when Germany was pushed all the way into Berlin. And the details are that it was found in a sofa somewhere in Berlin, and it couldn't have been the Reichstag because that place was absolutely burned.
So waiting for that 8-hour
So
World
there
War
are
II
several
video.
theories about why
I'll react
this
to the
book
whole
was
thing
created,
if it comes
if
out.
this book is real, etc., etc. Fish rain is a phenomenon that occurs for seemingly no reason, in which various times throughout history.
Do you guys have Big Red where you live? I've heard they don't have Big Red in some places. It's like my favorite soda ever. I heard they don't have Big Red in some places other than Texas. Is that true? If you live in somewhere other than Texas and you've had Big Red, write in the comments below.
Fish have begun to fall from the sky. Similar things have happened with rats, snakes, etc. The leading theory is that somewhere hundreds of miles away a tornado happened that either pulled these things out of the water or off of land and threw them that far. But even then, that doesn't necessarily make sense looking at some of the specific instances.
It'd be really convenient having to a place that was starving.
It's just weird. Figure it out for yourself. Clinton body doubles is exactly what it says. That several times in the public, the Clintons have used body doubles at either politically challenging times or times they were.
I don't deny any I don't deny any theories about the Clintons.
Butterfly effect is a concept that most.
This is really interesting. Oh, the butterfly effect.
Theory and things such as that.
And things such as
very minor change will cause a series of changes to happen afterwards that can affect the course of history. For example, if I was to simply do this video a minute longer and not leave the house, well, that could cause me to end up in a car accident that may kill me or injure me or something rather, which would change the course of history all because of one seemingly meaningless task. This is where you hear the whole, don't go back into the past and flip over a stone, you could change world history. This is just that laid out. Ninja.
I really like that in sports, because you need to understand, butterfly effects in sports are so easy to do, because all it takes is like one game and the draft order could get changed. One game and the lottery gets changed, the draft order gets changed, and now one of the greatest players of all time now gets drafted by a different team. Like, all it takes is all it takes is, like, when the draft lottery used to be done by a coin flip back in the day, all it took was, if the coin landed on a different way, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would have been drafted by the Suns, and Magic Johnson would have been drafted by the Bulls. Probably means Michael Jordan wouldn't have been drafted by the Bulls because they wouldn't have been good when he was drafted. So it just changes the entire course of history, just by simple things with the draft in sports and stuff.
Are a Japanese legend of these giant human-like sort of porpoise-looking creatures that roam in the Pacific Ocean and sing sailors into their death. These are very different from mermaids, not only in their appearance, but the fact they are much, much larger.
I know you're going to hate me for saying this, but it kind of looks like Among Us.
I believe up to 50 feet in some of the legends descriptions. But what's also interesting is that there are several very similar things to ninjas mentioned in Viking culture and in Indian culture and things such as. Which makes it
and
weird
things such as
these tribes have never had contact
that's
with each other, so.
Things like that when multiple tribes mention the same thing, even though they're no contact to each other, and it's something as specific as that, is, I think, good evidence for theories a lot of the time.
The Patterson-Gimlin massacre is in reference to the Patterson-Gimlin.
Especially with stuff in the ocean, because we haven't explored like 95% of the ocean.
For those that don't know, it is the very famous video or supposed first sighting of Bigfoot. If you watch the entire tape, at the beginning there seems to be something on the ground that appears as a pool of blood, and the men in the video are washing blood off of their hands. The idea of this being that these people were up there hunting for Bigfoot and simply started taking the video as the last one was leaving or walking around the campground. This leads into the idea among Bigfoot hunters that the reason we don't see them is that they were hunted out by people, and what we're seemingly watching here is the last group near the public eye being massacred. When I mentioned at the beginning, there are things that can get me kicked off of YouTube immediately. This is what I was referring to. So feel free to look it up in your own time. I'm going to
Here we go.
With it. The Houdin Plan was an idea imagined by anthropologist Edward Houdin, which essentially said after World War II they needed to do something about the Germans, and the best thing to do was something called the Great Replacement Theory, and I'm going to stop talking there and you can figure it out for yourself.
No. We have to Google this, guys. We have to Google this. We're Googling it right now. Houdin Plan. We're doing it right now, man. We're doing it right now. Alright. The Hooten Plan. Okay. Alright. In 1943, Hooten had an article entitled Breed War Strain Out of Germans, published in New York newspaper PM. In the article, he proposed 4 measures with an objective to destroy German nationalism and aggressive ideology while retaining and perpetuating desirable German biological and sociological capabilities. Hooten wrote these measures as follows. Number 1, execute or imprison for life all leaders of the Nazi Party, permanently exile all professional army officers. For a period of 20 years or more, utilize the bulk of the present German army as rehabilitation labor units in devastated areas of the Allied nations in Europe and elsewhere. These laborers should not be treated as prisoners of war and convicts, but as paid employees, supervised and restricted as to movement from the area of their work. They might be allowed the privilege of naturalization upon evidence of good behavior. The single men should be permitted to marry only women of the country their abode or naturalization. The families of the men already married should remain in Germany for a period of years, but might eventually be permitted to join the fathers. The latter should not be allowed to return to Germany. The objections of this measure induce reduction of the birth rate of pure Germans, neutralization of German aggressiveness by outbreeding, and denationalizations of intoxicated individuals. Break up the German Reich into several states, probably its original component states, permitting each, after a suitable interval of supervision and government by the Allied nations, to choose its own form of non-fascist government. The object of this measure is to destroy the national framework of unified German aggression. During the period of supervision and occupation of German states, the civilian staffs of the Allied nation encourage members of these groups to intermarry with German women and settle there permanently. During this period, also encouraged the immigration settlement into German states of non-German nationals, especially males. So basically, don't let Germans get with other Germans. Is basically, why would that get you kicked off of YouTube? I don't get it. Maybe I'm missing something there. So don't let Germans get with other Germans. So eventually, everyone is just half German, and then if you get a half German, you can't let them marry another half German, so you get say the next person's 25% German, and it gets great replacement. Makes sense.
The oil pit squid was discovered in Indiana, in which, while cultivating an oil source, there was an 8 to 12-inch squid that popped out, and supposedly this has happened more than once by oil crews in the area. This makes absolutely no sense because the squid shouldn't be able to survive in oil, and why is it in the middle of landlocked Indiana? A lot of the information I found on this related back to the Hollow Earth idea. Regardless of what your theory is on it, it's
imagine you're drilling for oil and you literally get an Agartha squid.
Weird that this thing exists at all. And then lastly, I'm going to get into the 2 most interesting theories.
Before we get into the 2 most interesting theories, we got an ad. 1 second. We gotta get YouTube rank on Hypixel before we can afford YouTube Premium, guys. That's 30k subs.
On this tier, and I believe that they're interconnected to each other. The first is the people of the Mount theory. The background of it essentially works like this. In the 1820s, there was an animal researcher who was trying to figure out why lemurs existed in some parts of the world.
Lemuria.
And seemingly
the theory of Lemuria before they had discovered the movement of the tectonic plates in Pangea and that. Because they didn't understand how they got from one place to another, because they didn't understand the continents moved. So they didn't understand how things from India got to Madagascar, because out of India and Madagascar were connected in Pangea, but they didn't know that. So they thought there was a continent in between called Lemuria. Look at me with the facts, already knowing it. I'm out here.
Pangea, and that all of the continents were originally pushed together. However, even going off of Pangea, that would mean there was a giant portion of land that just doesn't exist anymore. With the idea being whenever the plate shifted, it simply sank below water. The name of this unidentified continent was called Lemuria. Get it? Lemuria. Near the coast of where Lemuria is supposed to be is an area known as Mount Shasta. Locals have said that at night you can see people leaving in robes. And these people are tall, like much taller than any person can be, 9 to 10 feet. Supposedly beneath Mount Shasta is a completely hollow ground. And the survivors of this Lemuria
they had to go to the League.
Have lived under there, untouched by society ever since. In 1904, a researcher went to Mount Shasta and said he found miles and miles of underground caves full of gold and silver and
Bros are taking it to the wrong kind of hole.
crystals and things such
Sounds wrong,
as.
not what I meant.
But whenever he put together a team to go research it, he disappeared, which...
Well, that's suspicious. If anyone ever goes to go research something and they disappear, call everything off, bro. No, bro, that's too suspicious. Too suspicious. Call everything off.
weird. Most of what I found on Lemurians and the people...
Especially if it was already weird beforehand.
Again, relates back to Hollow Earth theory, which is why I think that was mentioned so much in this stage. For the idea that there is this...
Oh, I forgot. We're mentioning people who are 9 to 10 feet. Got it. Giants.
Untouched race of people existing in underground caves in the modern times. This also relates to something else on this tier, which is crystal skulls. There are 13 perfectly made crystal skulls that have been found variously around the world, but what's odd about them is while they're all made exactly the same, no one can place where they came from. They were each recovered from different dig sites and seem to have the same properties as one another, yet no one really knows
That's
where
weird.
they came from. And every accusation where they came from, such as pre-Columbia or Spain or whatever, has been proved false. According to the legend surrounding the skulls, though, they supposedly contain energy. Anyone who touches the skull or comes into contact with it shares their memories with it, and then that is passed on to the next handler, and so on and so forth. What's interesting about this is part of what the researcher mentioned who got lost in the Mount Shasta cave in 1904 is that they communicated using crystals. When I was reading this for this
connections.
These are two different theories. I thought it was wild that these crystals that Lemurians have to supposedly communicate with each other seem to be the same things that these skulls were that supposedly communicate with each other, and no one knew where the skulls came from, and it related back to Lemurian. Again, to clarify, I don't believe in this. I think it's neat. So to encompass this
Yeah,
whole
it's just
theory
neat, bro.
together, especially with other
That's what I mean for a lot of conspiracy theories. You don't necessarily need to believe it for it to just still be cool and neat.
that would mean that the Lemurians did go underground but found either the Agartha beneath Earth or at least hidden passageways that work all the way under Earth, and there is an entire
Why he look like Michael Jackson if he was in Lord of the Rings?
civilization of humanity existing apart from ourselves underground, and periodically their belongings, such as these crystal skulls, are found in other parts of the world. So there's my huge headcanon for secret underground mole people. And that will do it for tier 2. This was a long one. They only get long.
Alright, I think that's gonna be it for me too. Yeah, that was a good tier. I like the ending there. We connected two of the theories. Make sure to write your thoughts down below of anything I said about any of the theories, and if you want me to keep going with the series, yeah, leave a like and do all that stuff, and subscribe, because I'm almost to 600 subscribers. We're 580 out of 600 so far, so yeah, subscribe. Bye.